Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners.
Welcome back, everybody. Time again for another Word Balloon Live, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. I hope my camera isn't too choppy, but good to see everybody. And it's already been a busy January, but I'm really happy to welcome Richard Ashley Hamilton, who is here to talk about not only his brand new Aftershock book, Fear Book Club, but his work over the years on the How to Train Your Dragon franchise, some other comics as well. Richard, welcome. It's great to have you.
It's truly great to be here, John. Thank you. Awesome to see you.
Hey, man, seriously, as I said earlier, off the air, you're a loyal member of the League of Word Balloon Listeners. As you said, you came with your cape and domino mask all ready to go, and we're here in your secret headquarters and my secret headquarters, so this is going to be a fun conversation.
Damn straight, yeah.
So, and look, our buddy Kurt is watching as well, Kurt Matilla. So that's fantastic. How you doing, Kurt? Look at Kurt's picture, man. That's great. It looks like he's a member of Three Dog Night in that picture.
Kurt, I've got the shakes. I feel like I should have a Manhattan right now.
No. This is good, man. No, please, Jesus. This is going to be fantastic. Nicholas Brandt, thank you for joining us. Everybody tonight on a Friday. This is great. And I like doing later conversations. I mean, everyone knows I do Kinescope late for the East Coast and the Central Time Zone and stuff, not too late for the West Coast. So this is terrific. But let's start with your new Aftershock book, Fear Book Club. What can you tell us about Fear Book Club?
Yeah, well, it's part of Aftershock's Young Readers line, Seismic Press. They already had a book that came out last year called Rainbow Bridge, which was awesome. I highly recommend if anyone hasn't checked that out yet. Really beautiful, touching story for anyone who's had a pet or loves animals. But our book, Fear Book Club, is the second title in the Seismic Press line. And, it's very much a horror story for kids, and I guess by kids, because I'm pretty immature, and the Aftershock people not have a good time too. But it's a very, I'm a child of the 80s, so I'm like a big disciple of the Amblin movies and, Goonies and, even stuff like Ghostbusters, which is not technically an Amblin movie, but I kind of put it in that same pantheon. So, I wanted to do a story that was truly scary for kids, but also meeting them where they are in their lives right now, and is addressing what I think is really scary to the kids in this world today. And I don't know what your take on it is, John. I feel like the stuff that kids have to go through today is so much worse than what we had to go through growing up. Just all the stuff they're exposed to on the news and social media, and it's on their devices, which they have with them. It's like inescapable. And I remember being a kid and being able to kind of bury my head in the sand and read comics and sort of forget about what I thought were my worries. And now, like, kids today don't have that luxury. So anyway, all that said, it's not like there it is. There's Marco Matrone's beautiful cover. It's a fun story, and it's about mainly about that boy in the front there, Whit Garcia, the one with the camera. He's a shy young kid. He's a shutterbug, and he and his mom moved to a new town, and so he's got to start a new middle school, which is already very scary and horrific right there. And we kind of explain over the course of the story why they make that move. There's sort of a tragedy in his backstory, but Whit's very introspective, and he uses that camera almost like a little bit of a security blanket. He's able, if he's looking through the camera through a zoom lens at people far away, then he doesn't have to interact with them face to face, right? So the principal at this new school, she knows what's going on. She sees this shy kid with the camera, and she's like, I know how to get this kid to open up. I'm gonna have him join a club. And if he likes taking pictures so much, well, then he can take pictures in the school yearbook club. And Whit hates this idea, and he hates it even more when he meets the other kids in the club who you see behind him. The redheaded boy is kind of sort of like Whit's bully when he starts the school. And he's the reason he's in the club is he's commuting detention hours by being forced to do the yearbook club. And then there's the two girls behind him, the Kim twins, Hillary and Hester. They're Korean American. They come from sort of very conservative background, but they have these very Western interests. Hillary wants to be a stand-up comedian, sort of like a Margaret Cho, but all her jokes are like school related and cafeteria food related. And Hester, she's a lot like your League of Word Balloon listeners. She's a comics fan, and she writes and draws her own graphic novels on her tablet. And they're a bunch of misfits. Kind of the joke we have in the book is like, how yearbooks often bestow honorary titles to students like most athletic or, most gifted student, most likely to succeed. None of these kids in this club are ever going to be voted most likely to succeed. They're a bunch of losers. But they start doing yearbook stuff, and Whit goes around the school and he takes pictures with his camera. And the school, he's taking pictures of empty hallways. There's a condemned wing that you see here that got kind of jacked up during an earthquake a while ago. And Whit is just taking these very cool, moody photos, but it's empty. There's no one there. And then when he goes back to his apartment that he shares with his mom, he's turned his bedroom into a dark room. He's painted the walls all black and stuff. And he turns on the red light and he develops the photos. And then these photographs that he took of these empty locations are now populated with these very creepy, very photo negative, like ghostly children. There you go. There's one of them right there. And they wear clothes from different eras. And they start to come out of the woodwork, and they don't just show up in Whit's photos. After a while, he can see them in person. They're reaching out, trying to get him. And basically, Whit and his yearbook club, they have to figure out what is going on. There's sort of a big supernatural mystery at their school. Where are these ghost kids coming from? What happened to them? And if Whit and his pals, his frenemies in the yearbook club don't figure it out, they may wind up joining these ghost kids. So there's sort of an urgency to it. And it's I think it's a lot of fun. I'm a little biased, but you saw some of Marco's art, which is exquisite in my opinion.
Yeah.
And it's really fun. It's got a nice bounce to it, an animated quality. And Dave Sharp does the letters. He does a really phenomenally great job lettering it. And, we wanted something that was going to be like a scary story, but for today's kids, and kind of addressing a lot of the fears and anxieties that they just have to deal with day in and day out. It kind of sucks to be a kid, especially in middle school. I don't know about you. I hated middle school. It was a nightmare.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan either. Absolutely. But one of the things that got me through it were after school activities. And that's why I like this story, because I'm a massive believer. Whenever I get hit up for school charities and it's funding the after school stuff, I'm like, you got my money. Don't worry about it, because it's so important. And as I'm sure it happened for you, it happened in high school, but we had a high school radio station. And that's kind of where I found my passion and everything. And that's really I mean, God, for 30 years, that's what I did. And it's because of the positive reinforcement I got being in that after school club and everything. And it's like, no, wait, I can do this. So it's kind of
Same.
cool. I imagine, yeah, tell me.
Yeah, no. I just I was kind of, I think, one of two sort of like out comic book fans that were like open about reading comics. So it was not a popular pursuit back then in the early '90s. But I sort of became more in high school. Whenever we'd have to do a project, I would make like a movie, on like a video camera my grandma got me, and I, press all my friends into doing it, and we had fun, and then we just started doing them for fun, and that sort of became like my identity, and being like the film geek of the school. So yeah, I couldn't agree more about the importance of like these extracurriculars, or just really like, if you can find one friend in school, you're probably doing better than most people. But if you can find something that you're passionate about and you can do it, one, that'll probably keep you sane, and two, you'll probably learn more doing that than anything you're going to learn in a textbook. Like, I don't remember anything I learned in middle school. I know I learned stuff. I'm sure I use it every day, but like, it doesn't stand out. Yeah.
No, you're right, man. And it's, I mean, the thing that, and I always feel for kids that are homeschooled, because it really, I think the best thing about school is, hey, you're thrown together with people you don't know, so you have to work together, and you learn people skills of just coping with other people and meeting other people, and it's great because, I mean, truly, it's funny. I was talking to some old friends from high school and college and stuff. And I mean, to compare the two it almost sounds ludicrous, and I don't mean to mitigate what people in the military go through, but it really is. They're like your war buddies, and you go through those awkward years of adolescence and everything else, and it's like, hey, man, these people know me better than my own family, and you can cut through the BS and just, I mean, literally, Tuesday night got together with a bunch of high school buddies, and we're all in different lines of work and we're all doing different things, but at the end of the day, it's like, no, these people know who I am, and there's no pretense or anything. They've seen me at my best, they've seen me at my worst, and I'm most comfortable with them.
Well, I had that more when I got to college and went to film school, because then I feel like I was really sort of surrounded by people with very similar interests. And one of them, my buddy Mark Hofstadter's in the comments. Hi, Mark. Thank you.
Yeah, man.
And,
yeah. And we'll talk about Scoop in a second. But yes, Mark points out. And yeah, Scoop is awesome. So we will be talking about that in a minute.
Yeah, but all those times that school hallways can be like trenches in a battlefield, and having to go through midterms and finals and all those projects, and just like all the crazy stuff you get into, and like the social interactions and everything. You're right. That's the reason why you become friends for life. You go through these crazy things together.
Very cool. I don't know who this person is, but they yell out too. Is this another friend? I don't know.
Yes, that's another college friend of mine. Hi, Marina. Yeah.
Hi, Maria. That's awesome. That's fantastic, man. Very cool. I'm glad your crew is coming out to support you, Richard. This is great.
Yeah, and they're all like successful film people. They should be. Marina's a showrunner. She should be working, and Mark should be producing awesome stuff. But thank you for playing hooky and watching Word Balloon.
What's her show? Tell me about her show.
I don't know if I can say the name of it yet. I don't know the name, but it's on Netflix, and it's a comedy thing, and it's still it's going to she'll announce it later, I guess. Not my story to tell. Okay. Sorry, John.
No. We all respect NDAs, and I that's fine. It's cool. Good luck with the show. That's excellent.
Yeah.
And Nicholas wants to know what superlative did you get in high school?
I didn't get any in high school. In the 9th grade, though, we were reading To Kill a Mockingbird in English class, and they basically everyone got an award that year, and mine was Best Sense of Justice, like Atticus Finch. And everyone laughed, and they thought it was like a BS kind of award. But I was like, hey, that's all right. I'm proud of that. I'll take that. I grew up reading comics, so my morality is, informed by Stan Lee, and so like I'm glad they thought I had a good sense of justice. It definitely wasn't anything athletic, I'll tell you that. And it wasn't anything academic. Like I did okay, but I was not. My grades weren't good enough to be like a nerd or anything. You know.
No, but virtue is very important to us comic book fans. Absolutely, man. That's terrific. That's wonderful. Hilarious, man. So, Fear Book Club, is it a limited series? How many issues is it going to be?
Well, it's a original graphic novel. You know, when we started doing the book, really just a year ago, it was kind of a question of, is it going to be like 5 issues or is it going to be a graphic novel? But I think you know, Aftershock made the determination that for like you know, younger audience, they're accustomed to getting books just sort of like a standalone graphic novels, you know, like the Dave Pilkey books and the Raina Telgemeier ones and Amulet and all that stuff. So it's I picked up my copy. It came out on Wednesday in comic shops, and it's a really beautiful book. I mean, you know, it's Aftershock. It looks great, but the colors are really vivid. There's nice spot varnish on the cover. It's a really cool looking book. So yeah, and but to answer your question, it's I think if we did our jobs right, this volume is very much like a complete story with a beginning, middle, and an end. But we certainly have a lot of little Easter eggy things in there. I might be the only one who knows they're Easter eggs, but they are in there. And if it's successful enough, then hopefully we can tell more stories with these guys. I love these kids, and I love the scary stuff they get into.
That's awesome, man. And now earlier, as I said, Mark mentioned Scoop.
Yeah.
And you're like, hey, you let me know. You're like, hey, man, you're gonna like Scoop because it involves journalism. It certainly does, and I enjoyed both volumes. Here's the cover to Volume 1, breaking news. And what can you tell us about Scoop?
Yeah, Scoop is, I guess the elevator pitch is it's Veronica Mars meets X-Files, but it's about Sophie Cooper. It's set in my hometown of Miami, Florida, and she's sort of like your average high school freshman, but the one difference is that her dad has been accused of like sort of like a Bernie Madoff level white collar crime. And he's on house arrest, and he's got the ankle monitor, the whole 9 yards. And there's a whole media circus camped outside of their front lawn of their house. They're constantly surveilling them. And there hasn't been a trial or anything, but in the court of public opinion, everyone thinks Sophie's dad is guilty of sin. And the only person who believes he's innocent is Sophie herself. And her thinking is like in her little, you know, sort of a 14-year-old brain, if the news has like hurt my family, then I'm going to use the news to help my family and absolve us and clear my dad's name. So she becomes an intern at a news station, a TV news station in Miami. Only it's the worst news station in the world. They show up late to all the reports. They get all the facts wrong. Their equipment is constantly getting repossessed. They don't even have a Doppler screen. They just have like a map of Florida, and they stick little Velcro suns and clouds and rain clouds on there. It's total amateur hour. They're the pits. But Sophie, and you know, she's an intern, right? So like she's not doing hardcore journalism in the beginning. She's going on coffee runs. She's making photocopies. She's changing the paper in the fax machine. They're so bad they still use a fax machine. And one day these faxes start coming in, and they look like they're written by a crazy person, like crazy handwriting all up and down the margins, weird schematics talking about UFOs, and ghosts, and aliens, and alligator people. But these faxes also mention the name of the bank that has accused her dad of white collar crime. And now Sophie has a lead. And so she starts to investigate this. None of the other seasoned reporters want to touch it, but they're like, sure, kid, go for it. So she investigates it, and it turns out that it's all true. All this supernatural stuff is going on, and it's tied to this vast conspiracy that involves her dad. And if she can blow this case wide open and make the whole world aware of it, then she'll clear her dad's name, and Bob's your uncle. She gets her normal life back. And so that's kind of the overall plot of it. And then we have another volume that came out. Actually, it was now last year, or it was like early 2021. And she has another case in that one, and they're a lot of fun. You know, when I was in college, I had an internship at CNN in Miami, and I wanted to get an internship like on a cool movie because I was a film student, but there weren't many shooting in Miami at the time, and I don't know, I didn't have the juice to get a hookup. But my parents knew someone who worked at CNN, so that was like my consolation prize. And it turned out to be like the best learning experience of my life. My first day, on the job was the day that Gianni Versace, the fashion designer, that he was murdered in his mansion in South Beach. And so I walked into CNN. It was my first day. I was wearing a suit and tie like an idiot. I was trying to make a good impression, but it's the summer in Miami, like 100 degrees out and humidity. And I'm there for like 20 minutes, and then all the phones just light up, just like out of a movie. And people are like, have multiple receivers through their ears. And nobody quite knew what was going on. They just knew there was a murder in South Beach, and it involved a celebrity. And the producer I was working for, she was like, you new kid, go get in the news van, go learn something. So I got to go ride in the news van in the front down to South Beach. We pulled up at the front. And I'm sorry, I don't never mean to make light of this, but his Mr. Versace's body was still there. It was covered by a coroner's sheet. There's blood all over the steps. The police are still trying to get their arms around the scene. There's a bunch of rubberneckers. And that was my summer break that year, was learning all about journalism the hard way, and the investigating his murder, the manhunt for Andrew Cunanan, like the whole thing. And that was kind of where the seeds for Scoop were first planted in my brain and first germinated. And in the first volume, Sophie does investigate a murder that is analogous to Versace, hopefully not in a gross morbid way. It was cool. And what I didn't realize at the time was that basically, I think most people agree, and you keep me honest here, John, but like the 24-hour news cycle really started with the OJ case, which was only like a year and a half before Versace's murder. And so, that's what put like CNN on the map, and everyone was riveted to the next updates and what did Johnny Cochran do this time? And then the case was over, and there was like this vacuum, and like, what do we fill it with? And then all of a sudden this Versace thing happens, and it's sexy, it's in Miami, it's international. And so like my hometown, it was under the microscope. And then of course OJ Simpson moves to Miami after he's acquitted, and so we kind of play a little bit with that in Scoop Volume 2, and that was trippy because I would go to the movie theater and OJ would be there, and like kind of limping into the lobby, waving, hey everyone, and everyone's just kind of like cringing with their popcorn, like yikes. And I have a really good memory for like movies that I see. Like I can tell you what theater who I was with when I saw such and such movie. I cannot tell you what movie I saw that day. I don't know if it was a comedy or anything. I just know I was in this theater and OJ was there, and it was like almost as if he had COVID. Nobody was sitting around him, like a ring of empty seats around him, and he was there with his girlfriend or whatever. Looked a lot like Nicole. And it was kind of like Max Cady and Cape Fear. He's like laughing and slapping his knee. Everyone else is completely silent. And I just walked in, sat down for 2 hours, was terrified, and left. I don't think I ate popcorn or drank soda or anything. So So anyway, I took all that and I made kids comics out of it, and that's what Scoop is. So if you like Veronica Mars, if you like, actually, I think she's more like Carl Kolchak. That was a huge inspiration. The Night Stalker. I say she's kind of like our Carla Kolchak. So if you like that, and that's a great reference for the kids. They all know Darren McGavin. They're huge fans. But that's why I do the Veronica Mars thing. But yeah, if you like that,
I think the right person though, because I love Kolchak, so that's quite all right. It's good. It's like you threw Columbo at me as well for Scoop, and I'm like, man, that's great. That's outstanding. So too goddamn funny. No, I get it, and I think that's wonderful. And also, I'm fighting a bot right now that managed to join us. But don't worry, man. I'll get back. If you forgive my lack of camera and not looking at you and everything right now. But no, the Scoop. I like both Scoop stories. I think they're fantastic. And as you can relate, and really as you've conveyed, the energy of a newsroom. There's nothing like it. And I've worked both in straight up news and I worked in sports news, and it really is. There really is this vibe that you can't get in any other media job, where you got to find the story and you got to get the facts right, and you're on the phone or you're running around and you're trying to establish details. confirm things and stuff. No, it's the best. And it was funny when and this again, not to mitigate the important stuff that news journalists do, but when I first started Word Balloon and I would run around conventions and they would break, Marvel's going to do a new Spider-Woman series starting in September or whatever. That was the closest I came to the vibe I got working in a newsroom. And then I'm running around hustling as like a reporter trying to get the story and everything.
Yeah.
So I can certainly relate. It was I love that feeling. I really do. I miss that feeling. And in fact, up until the start of COVID, I was working in a newsroom for CBS here in Chicago and everything. So no, I get it.
Yeah, it is infectious, and like I think that part of the education was, I guess, sort of the nuts and bolts of how do you build a story, but part of it was also like kind of seeing the behind the scenes politics, which was where real eye opener for me, because I was only part of that used to see news as like a TV viewer, so you just see these personalities that are facing the public, but kind of behind the scenes seeing what reporter hated what producer and what was being called on down from high from Turner and whatever. It was like, that was really cool. And also like kind of the psychology of one of the things they were very nice enough to kind of let me do was do MOS's Man on the Street reports, where I know what this is, but I'd just be off camera holding up a microphone and we would just pull random people off of the South Beach. Hey, you want to be on camera? You want to tell us what you think? And just like the different perspectives all these people had, and some of them just wanted to be on camera and just said whatever. Other people had like very strong personalities and perspectives on who really did the killing and all that. And it was just, and everything in between. And it was so cool. And I think even like at an early age, it kind of drove home to me the idea of like, it's the news is like such a mosaic. And like you can, depending on how you look at it, thanks, Kurt. You could see how if you don't get the facts right, stories can get warped and people can get the wrong lesson or the wrong truth from it and the wrong message from it. And so, and this is obviously something we're contending with big time right now. So that's kind of one of the sub themes of Scoop as well, is like, again, kids today are growing up with stuff that we never really had to contend with when we were younger. And, the fake news of it all and the bullying online and just sort of like these cultivated social media profiles that are like highly curated, that are no reflection of reality at all. And yet people are looking at that, thinking that's the way the world is and measuring themselves against it, or are hearing fake news, taking it as gospel, and how that's kind of affecting our reality too. So anyway, nice heady themes for a kid's comic.
No, but also on the positive side, and it's really interesting, and I haven't had that many opportunities to talk to kids growing up now, but I think all the digital things that kids can do that, you and I were doing pre-digital. I mean, you being a Shutterbug and also and working at CNN, really before the internet became what it is in the last 20 years or so. I mean, it's funny. On the one hand, I always cringe when I'm watching a TV show and you see an 8-year-old and it's like, Grandma, I need you for my podcast. And I'm like, oh, don't do that. Please don't do that. But on the other hand, I'm like, well, that's good. I mean, I'd be doing the same thing if I were 8 years old and had this burning interest that I've had, in my years actually working in media. So no, I get it. And it's going to be interesting to see with all the shit, positive and negative, that the kids have had to grow up with in this generation, what kind of media we get in the next 20 years.
Yeah, it's for sure a double-edged sword, but I think for all the ills that are out there, I have 2 sons, they're 13 and 10, and they are so tech savvy and they have tremendous digital literacy and just the stuff they're able to put together. And my wife, their mom's a really tremendous researcher. And I think fortunately they've inherited that gene from her. So we're just trying to tell them all the stuff you see out there, take it with a grain of salt, have some common sense, don't, look into it, corroborate it. But, it's the way of the world right now. So you gotta kind of learn to live with it and live around it. And that's sort of one of the themes of Fear Book Club is like, we're living in this culture of fear and anxiety, and there's really not much we can do change that, I don't think. So what are we going to do? Run away and hide? No, you got to like learn to live around it and survive it, maybe even find a way to thrive within it. So that's kind of the hope for Fear Book Club, is that for kids or anyone who reads it, if you see kind of how our main characters are dealing with their fears and processing them and combating them, whether they're supernatural or more mundane, then maybe that'll kind of teach you a skill or a trick or a hack that you can apply to your own life if something scary comes up. And that's kind of another reason why I hope that we can make Fear Book Club a more of a going concern, because like Goosebumps was a huge influence on Fear Book Club. You know, the R.L. Stine books, those are awesome. They were such a gateway drug for my boys into reading. And I kind of missed them. I was a little old for them, but my brother, who's younger than me, he was super into them. And they're great, but they're anthologies, right? So like each book is kind of about a different kid, which is fine. But I was interested in following the same group of kids over an extended period of time and seeing how they're doing with sort of prolonged exposure to anxiety and fear and trauma, and how do they, over a long period of time, cope with that, you know, and could that be a kind of a good role model for the rest of the kids or grown-ups who are reading out there? So that's me on my soapbox.
Excellent. So yeah, Fear Book Club from Seismic, Aftershocks YA arm. Make sure you check it out. That's excellent. I'm looking right now. Vince Moore says congratulations on all the success, Richard. Very cool.
Vince and I used to, we would exhibit at the San Diego Comic-Con and a few other shows together. We were part of a group of a bunch of small indie publishers, and basically to defray the crazy costs of the booths there, we would all go in on them, and we had a really good time.
There you go, man. I'm sure we walked by each other at San Diego when I'd be there with Franco and Small Press and everything. You know,
I'm sure we did. I feel like I must have seen you, because I did a couple of Wizard World Chicagos. I think it probably would have been 2006 and 2007. I loved those shows. And the first year I went, I only had one issue of one book, and my brother was supposed to go work the booths with me, and he got a job. So my parents were like, we'll go, we'll fly out there and we'll meet you in Chicago and it'll be fun. I'm like, you guys have never really been to a Comic-Con before. We didn't get many Comic-Cons in Miami at all. Occasionally there'd be one at like the Airport Marriott, but maybe it was too far for a lot of people. But so like my mind was blown when I started going to San Diego and Chicago and stuff as a fan, and then going as a professional. But yeah, my folks came out and we stayed at the DoubleTree across the street from the convention center. And we would be shilling books during the day, and then we'd eat dinner at Gibson Steakhouse at night, and had a ball, man. I guess that's really touristy, but we loved it. And I was there a couple years. Great show.
Gibson's is a great place. I mean, that's the Rosemont one, but just as good as the one in the city. Absolutely. So no, you guys did good. That's outstanding. Do you like Segura? He's a great Miami born comic book person. You know, he had time at Archie, had time at DC, is a mystery novelist as well.
I'm a huge fan of his work, and it's I always get it wrong. It's Pete Hernandez or Pete Fernandez. I think it's
Pete Fernandez with an F.
Fernandez.
Absolutely.
No, he's awesome, and it's one of these things where I think we know some of the same people, but we have never met. Even though, like, I think he might live in New York now, but no, I'm a big fan of his work in comics and especially like in the mystery writing space. So there's a couple of guys from Miami.
Who else? Who am I missing?
There is a guy named, I think it's Mike Avila. He's a reporter for Sci-Fi Wire, and he's done some books and stuff now too. I don't think George Perez ever lived in Miami, but he's a South Florida guy. And so when we would have conventions, he would be there. Always the greatest guy in the world. I got him to sign so many of my Crisis comics, and where Flash dies, and some other things, and he just always made time for everyone. What a great guy. I'm gonna miss him.
I hear you, man. No, and again, we're all incredibly sad with what he's facing, but we celebrate him and his life and his work, and one of the real nice guys in comics. Absolutely, I totally.
What a legacy. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Absolutely, man. Well, you are contributing to a big franchise, and that's the How to Train Your Dragon franchise. And you've done a lot of work for them, both on screen and in comics. Um, Tell me how you got involved with this franchise.
Totally by wonderful happenstance. I was self-publishing comics for a while and doing okay. And then, but my wife unfortunately got pregnant with our first son, and so it's time to get a real job, with like benefits and steady paycheck and stuff. So, but my resume sucked because it was just like film school grad, screenwriting student and comic publisher, which was not setting the world on fire at the time. So I just started temping, to get my foot in the door. And one of the first places I temped was at DreamWorks. And it's a beautiful campus, like really Mediterranean style. They have free food. They had foosball tables. And I just remember temping there and calling my wife, who's, several months along pregnant, and be like, this place is awesome. And I thought I would hate working at a studio because I was an indie comic guy and I'm going to work for the man. This sucks. But it turned out to be one of the greatest things for me personally and for my career professionally. And so I just temped for a while, and one of the gigs I had was for a week working on the first How to Train Your Dragon, just assisting one of the producers there for a week. And I didn't know anything about it, but I saw all these art boards with these dragon designs by this guy, Nico Marley, and seeing the pictures of the cast, and it was basically like the cast of Superbad. They were all like, I'm like, what? Jonah Hill is like, and Jacob Baruchel, they're going to be doing the voices. What is this? But it looked like this was so right up my alley. I really hadn't followed a lot of the DreamWorks animated stuff before that, but I'm like, this is interesting. And then I finally got hired full time and worked for the chief creative officer, and he was actively involved. He's a guy named Bill Damashki, a native son of Chicago, like you. Great guy. And he knew that I was an aspiring writer and a comic book guy, and I made no secret of that. And so for like stuff that was, maybe sort of like geekier, like How to Train Your Dragon, he would let me listen in on that. And then Bill was the guy who brought Guillermo del Toro to DreamWorks Animation, which was a big thing for me too.
Wow.
And Guillermo had this very rough half a script for what would become Troll Hunters, and I was one of the first people to read that because Bill knew that I was, a geeky guy, and he's like, hey, I think you'll like this. So I just right place, right time, very lucky, and I thought I'm not making comics full time now. This is going to ruin my comics career, but actually I met more comic book people and got involved in more comic book stuff through DreamWorks, strangely. And then a job, they said they're going to do How to Train Dragon 2, and there was an opening there to be the script coordinator. And my boss, Bill, put me up for it. And I interviewed with Dean DeBlois, who's the writer-director of all the Dragon movies. There was another writer-director, Chris Sanders, on the first one, but then Dean took over solo on the last two. And I'm sorry, I was just telling somebody this the other day, so I'm repeating myself, but it's the best interview I ever had in my life because I thought I was going to have to answer all these questions about like what are my skills and how many words can I type per minute or whatever. It was none of that. Dean just sat me down in this cool room with all these storyboards and concept art for the second movie and he just told me the plot, like as if we were sitting around a campfire. And he just walked me through the whole thing, and he said, and that's the story. What do you think? Would you want to work on this? And I'm like, yeah, yes. And then we started talking about our interests, and he's a big comic book fan. He's a huge Conan fan, and he loved all the Ernie.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. You can see it, right? Like in his
Absolutely.
stuff. So we just started talking about comics, and I told him how I made comics, and I had this fantasy right there in this first meeting with him that maybe one day we'll make comics together. And sure enough, a couple of years later, we did. We wrote some Dragon comics together that kind of filled in the gap between the events of the second and third movie. That's one of them. The covers by
Am I right? Is this one of them as well, or
that's actually the poster for the third movie, but the previous image, which is also beautiful. And I consulted on the third movie, so I was involved in that one too. But on the second movie, I was a script coordinator. So basically, Dean wrote the script, and I would make sure that it whenever changes were made to the movie, those changes would be reflected in the script, and I would run all the recordings. So not run them, but
Wow.
make sure we got
That's
all the
great.
lines. Oh, it was so cool. So like whenever we would record Jay Baruchel or America Ferrera or Kate Blanchett plays the mom in it. Gerard Butler is the dad. And then
Wow.
I'm a big comedy nerd. So Kristen Wiig is one of the characters, and like the day she came
Love
in
her.
was very exciting for me.
Oh, I
And,
bet. Oh no, she's amazing.
Oh, she's so great. And TJ Miller is the voice of the other twin, Tough Nut, and he's a pretty wild guy if you've ever seen him like on Silicon Valley and stuff. So those were amazing. And for me, like for a guy with a writing background, to see them ad-libbing and the changes they would make and how certain lines wouldn't work for them and the adjustments they suggested. And Dean was very open to all that, and everything was very malleable. And so I'd just be, transcribing all the changes and the different takes as they're happening. Very scary, very, very fast paced, very nerve wracking, but what a boot camp. And I learned a ton. And then that led to me writing for the How to Train Your Dragon TV show on Netflix. I wrote on the first season of that. And we got a daytime Emmy for best writing, which was pretty cool. And then that led to me kind of doing more writing at DreamWorks. And then it wasn't just dragons, it was Troll Hunters, which is another thing that I love and am just a huge fan of, despite the fact that I worked on it. And, I worked on Voltron there for a while. We did a little bit of Masters of Universe stuff. I got to work on Trolls, not to be confused with Troll Hunters. These are the trolls with the hair,
With the crazy hair, sure.
Yeah. So Captain Underpants, a lot of other things. It was awesome. It was a good run. I was there for almost 10 years.
Oh, so you're not there anymore?
No. What happened was when Universal bought DreamWorks, they made some changes. And so my wife and my wife also worked there at that point. Remember, I called her and was like, this place is great. It was so great. We got her to work there too. But
That's
unfortunately,
fantastic.
we both got laid off on the exact same day, which was pretty freaky. And it was okay. Like for me, it was okay because I was doing enough writing on the side where I was starting to think maybe it's time for me to step away from DreamWorks and just focus on the freelance stuff. And actually, the person, I worked for a bunch of great people up until the very end. This person we worked for at the very end was horrible. It happens. I had a great track record there, but this last lady was not the nicest, even though her husband, I think, is a comic fan. So, but anyway, I was going to quit. And my wife very sagely said, you know what, Universal's just bought this place. Maybe they'll lay you off and you'll get paid to go. And that's exactly what happened. So that severance became sort of my nest egg to do my freelance writing career. Still chipping away here a few years later, so it's okay. But we just didn't know my wife was going to get laid off. But then they rehired her right after, and it's just you've been at big companies where there's mergers and acquisitions, and all this stuff happens. But it stings a little bit in the beginning. But I'm very grateful for DreamWorks and the couple of people there who really were like my guardian angels. I would not have my career without them. So. It's all good.
Let me ask you about when you were script consulting and you were handling the voice sessions. Something I've always wanted to ask, because as on-camera celebrities do more animation, you still have and forgive me, I'm going to say people like Susan Eisenberg, my buddy, who's Wonder Woman on the Justice League cartoons, who are real voiceover actors. And so, have you ever worked with Susan?
No, I haven't, but I'm a fan of her work from the Justice League cartoon and some of the other things that she's done. It's funny, like animation is kind of still very much a cottage industry, so you do see the same names, and somebody as talented as Susan gets a lot of, you see her name in a couple of different things, just like you'll see, what's her name? I think it's Grey Griffin or Grey Delisle, but she's Daphne in Scooby-Doo, and she's in a bunch of other things. And there were a lot of really talented actors who were specific animation voice actors, right? But they're not big names outside of that industry, like in the way of like a Gerard Butler or Kate Blanchett. And for Jeffrey Katzenberg, who was in control of DreamWorks at the time, it was very important to him to have big name people because they would be like a draw ostensibly
100%.
for the movie. But we would record scratch, which is like temporary dialogue, because and stop me if I'm telling you stuff you already know, John, but
no, keep going for the audience. I love this.
Oh, cool. When you're making an animated movie, you're doing several screenings throughout the course of making the movie, and they start off super rough, super rudimentary. They're just like drawings, they're storyboards, right? But you edit them together, and it's almost like motion comics. Like you get slight animation from panel to panel, and you're just kind of gradually doing iterations and shaping the thing, and then animation starts coming in, and you put that. Well, first there's layout, which is like previs, then animation, then surfacing and lighting and effects and crowds, and then the music, and you just keep adding layers to this thing, and then by the end you've got the finished movie. But you're doing dozens and dozens of screenings all along, and you have to record dialogue to go in those screenings, and you're not going to pay Jay Baruchel to do a dialogue for dozens of screenings. So we would do voices, or we would hire voice actors. There's one guy named Yuri Rosenthal, I think his name is. He's done a bunch of like Spider-Man cartoons and stuff. He is amazing, and so he's not a movie star, although he's a good-looking guy and certainly could be and stuff. But he would come in and he would kill it all the time. And unfortunately, we weren't able to use him in the final movie. But it's just a constant reminder of how many talented people there are out there.
I wondered if there was any sort of learning curve for the on-camera people to do animation and get that right level of energy and projection that is different than the more naturalistic approach in feature, on-camera features. And
for sure. No, I've got two great examples of that, because I think basically all the cast from the first movie returned for the second one, and Craig Ferguson, who's Gobber, is like, he's done a bunch. That guy's amazing, and he just comes in and kills it.
I love that guy.
He'll just record from Scotland. He'll like come in and like have his sunglasses on, do his line, be like, all right, peace, and then he's out. But we had some new additions to the cast for the second one, and Kate Blanchett was one of them, but she took to it very quickly. And I think she's also done like a lot of different acting, like she's on stage and she's done film and TV. So I think she knows how to
classic
modulate,
British career. Certainly.
Yeah. But we had Kit Harrington was in the second movie, and this was really
love that guy.
Right? Like Jon Snow, Dane Whitman. But this was, I think, just before Game of Thrones blew up. This was like right after they'd done the first season, and I think they were actually, I think they were in production on the second season, and Kit had broken his leg doing a stunt, so he was kind of homebound and like climbing up the walls, but he would come in crutches and do the recordings for his character Eric. And his character is supposed to be kind of like a Laplander, and they tried to get him. They thought maybe you should try a Dutch accent. They had Kit, who has this beautiful voice, which is now very famous and identifiable. They had him doing working with a great vocal coach to learn a Dutch accent, and then he came in and did the audition. And to me, he wound up sounding like Goldmember, from Austin Powers.
Sure, yeah, that goofy Mike Myers Dutch accent, yeah.
It was a total catastrophe. And after that one recording session, I'm like, you know what, Kit, your regular voice is great. So he was himself, and it was perfect. And then the other new guy for that movie was Jaimin Hansu, played the villain Drago, and he was at that time, I think, auditioning or just about to shoot Guardians of the Galaxy. And so I'm like all over this, and he actually showed up in like a crew shirt that had the Guardians of the Galaxy logo. And I'm asking him about it. He's like, no, man, I can't tell you Marvel. I can't tell you anything. And but he's this big, beautiful physical specimen. And he came to the recording with like this big duffel bag full of, I don't know what, like costumes or props. Like this was the first recording he'd ever done for animation. So he's bringing this big bag, and I'm supposed to greet him at the front of the studio and walk him to we have a recording studio at DreamWorks. And I'm trying to be like a good host, and I see he's got this huge bag. So I'm like, Mr. Hansu, can I can I get that for you? Can I carry that for you? And he looks at himself, like all his muscles, and he's wearing this tight Guardian shirt. And he looks at me and he's like, between the two of us, I think I should be the one to carry this bag. I'm like, yeah, all right. You're right. I tried. You're right.
Oh my God. Am I right? This is the co-star of Blood Diamonds as well with Leo DiCaprio.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. And he's the guy who
in Amistad and
of course.
Yeah.
And of course his role in Guardians, they're interrogating Star-Lord, and he's like,
yes.
I'm Star-Lord. Who?
Who? Yeah. And in the What If show, they actually give him more stuff to do, which is really fun. He's an awesome guy, and he's got two kids, and he was doing this movie for them. And so, but he showed up, and this guy is like a presence, like some people you look at them and are like, this is a movie star. And he went in the booth, and Dean was talking him through it, and they're in together. We're all on the outside with the recording engineer, and they're ready to, you feel good, Jaimin? You ready to go? Sure. And he's like, can I just have 1 minute? And it's sure. So Dean leaves the booth, and Jaimin's in there, and he turns his back to all of us, and he's like psyching himself up to get in character. And he just starts screaming at the top of his lungs, ah, ah! And everyone in the recording booth is like, whoa, you could feel the glass vibrating. And then he turns and he's like, okay, I think I'm ready. And we're like, oh, okay. And fortunately, the recording engineer was recording, and they actually had those screams, and they put them into the movie. There's a shot where Drago is waving his staff around, and he's in the middle of a battle, and they used it. It's really cool. Unfortunately, Jaimin blew out his voice doing that. So we were supposed to record 2 days worth of stuff, and he was so hoarse afterwards, but they kind of used it and worked with it. So he didn't do any more shouting like that afterwards. We're like, we can get the guys at Lucas to do the sound for that. Don't worry.
That's outstanding, man. That's great. There you go, man. You see, there you beautiful stories. That's amazing. Oh God, now I'm blanking. Chuck, damn it. He was maybe you'll know this. He was a Marvel writer. He wrote a lot of X-Men stuff in the early 2000s. Chuck Austin, attaboy.
We have the same agent.
Supervisor from King of the Hill.
Yeah.
He worked on King of the Hill and was a script supervisor and ran recording sessions. So yeah, I just had him back on a couple of years ago, maybe at the start of the pandemic.
You did, because his book with Comixology that he's doing with Patrick O'Leaf, which is a great book.
It is a great book.
Love it.
Yeah, you're right.
And I met him he'll never remember this, but I met him at a convention. This is like decades ago now, when he started doing, I think he did like a War Machine book for Marvel. And
he did. Great
it was
War
a beautiful
book.
Yeah.
He wrote and drew it. Yes.
And drew it. And I think it's like a weekly book. And I just couldn't believe how he was cranking out. They must have banked the art, but it was a really cool book. And then he started doing Uncanny X-Men. And I actually, this may be an unpopular opinion, I enjoyed his run. I know it was kind of divisive for a lot of people, but I loved it. There was kind of like a boy, I think his name was Sammy. He had like a fish face, and then he and the Juggernaut developed this beautiful relationship. And spoilers for a comic that's like almost 20 years old, but the kid dies, and it's really sends Juggernaut into this rage. And I was very affected by all that. So, I think he's a great writer.
One of my favorite Chuck Austin stories, because you're right, he took way too much shit. It's one thing to fine, I don't agree with what's going on in the book you're writing, but X-Men fans can be ruthless, and it really got me angry. And meanwhile, he also wrote, I thought, an exceptional Superman in Action Comics as well. But I remember at Wizard Chicago, he was tabled next to Darwin Cook.
Oh, wow.
Darwin had a line all around, his table and everything, people waiting. And I was in line for Darwin, and I saw a jerk and his girlfriend go up to Chuck. And it's funny you mentioned Juggernaut, because they're like, yeah, you really write a lot of Juggernaut. And he's like, yeah, it's one of my favorite characters. Well, I've been a long time X-Men writer or reader. You know nothing about Juggernaut. And this girlfriend's like, yeah, it's true. You really know nothing about Juggernaut. And I'm like, and literally Darwin is drawing and talking to fans, and he hears what's going on. And he's like, what the fuck? And honestly, these idiots walk away. And Darwin's like, I've never seen anyone so openly rude to a creator and have no concept of how rude they were being. And it got me so angry that I got out of line for Darwin and got into Chuck's line. And knowing that he could draw and remembering, I'm like, Chuck, didn't you draw Miracle Man? And he's like, yes, I did. I'm like, and I gave him a backboard of a comic. I'm like, draw me a Miracle Man. And it's one of my favorite pieces to this day. And truly, and I reminded him of that. He goes, oh yeah, I remember that was in Chicago. And I'm like, the amount of shit you took, man, was just ridiculous. And I'm so glad this sci-fi story, like you said, that he's doing for Comixology is just terrific with Pat Olive. And yeah, man. So it's,
you're a good man for doing that and showing him some love. Because I mean, the other thing is, like, I imagine Chuck flew out there in his own dime to Chicago, the flights, the hotel, the cost of the booth, and to pay all that money and have to suffer that abuse. Like, even if he didn't have to pay all that money, nobody should suffer that. I feel like it was probably just a wrong place, wrong time thing. That was probably like when social media was starting to like pick up a little more. And, you know, again, what we're talking about before, you know, these things can get really off kilter, the things that people say and project out there online. So, but he's, you know, I think doing great and has a pretty awesome career in animation and now in comics again, which is a total win.
Yeah, I agree. Patrick Moss wants to let you know he's got to pick up a copy of Fear Book Club. Congrats. Very cool.
Hey, Patrick. Patrick is an incredible artist and animator. He animated a How to Train Your Dragon. It's like a digital storybook app that we did a few years ago. And really, really talented guy and funny as hell too. So that's nice to see him, man.
That's great, man. And honestly, I'm loving your comics. Is there part of you that would like to see some of this stuff, you know, or other ideas, you know, in animation or live action?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, my feeling on it is like, I learned to read and write from comics. Like, that's my native medium, you know, and if I had my druthers, that's what I would do exclusively. But I think, as you know, and many of your guests will tell you, there's not a ton of money in comics, at least not at my level, you know, like if you can get one of those nice image exclusives or whatever, but you know, even then you do it for the love, right?
Sure.
But so you know, I guess that's the appeal of having these things adapted into, you know, animation or other media. And, you know, I have an agent, and, you know, we go out there and we try and pitch these things. And, you know, Aftershock they've got a pretty great team of Hollywood folks who are, you know, I think kind of working on this before long. But you know, my whole thing is like, I just want to make a great comic first, because I also feel like the time when I was coming into comics was when you had a lot of Hollywood people coming into comics. Like Kevin Smith had done Daredevil, and that was great. Then you started getting a couple other people, but then other people were like, oh, I'm just going to take my unsold screenplay or pitch and turn it into a comic and use that as the storyboard to get the option, right? And I would read a bunch of those, and they were terrible comics, and I would resent it, you know, and I was aware that my background, I'm not like a big Hollywood name or anything, but my training is a screenwriter. I lived in LA, I worked in the industry. So I worked extra hard to make sure that any comics I did hopefully did not feel like these shallow cash grab things, right? So I'm still like very much in that mindset. Like any comic I do, let's make it a great comic, and like it should actually be a comic, like a story you can only tell in a comic format. And then if something else happens with it, that's gravy on top, you know?
Sure, man. Absolutely. Another area that I've seen people go into beyond comics, but comic adjacent, is audio. And of course, being coming from radio, I'm a sucker for good audio, drama, adventure, comedy, whatever. Is that something you've looked at?
It is, and it's something I've done a little bit of in the past, sort of very tangentially, but one of the How to Train Your Dragon projects I wrote when the third movie came out was actually for Facebook of all places, but it was basically I had to write it as like a radio play. Like there was no, you know, we couldn't do custom animation for it or anything, but you could occasionally show like a picture of one of the characters or like a GIF of a dragon flying or shooting a fireball or whatever. So very limited visuals. And then just how could I tell a story just with dialogue and with the occasional sound effect. And it was a great exercise, and I had a lot of fun doing it. So I would love to do it again. And I know like, there's like, I think Vault, they do like a couple of audio books of their comics. Those are pretty great. Like, what's the one?
Marvel's getting into it. DC's
Marvel's
getting into
doing it. Yeah.
I mean, really, and again, being an old radio guy, I am, kind of in tune when I read that stuff is happening, and they've been great. And I know guys like Ben Percy, great Marvel writer, has been writing some Marvel audio stories as well as his traditional Marvel comics and stuff like that. And no, man, I'm glad you have established that distinction between the shit we were getting in the early 2000s, like you say, from some fly-by-night publishers that really were just, IP producers, and you could tell. And like you said, no, you'd open these books and they were shit. You're absolutely right about that. But no, I think your concepts are strong. And again, everyone knows, full disclosure, Aftershock is one of my sponsors. But one of the reasons why I'm glad I'm in business with Aftershock is they know how to make a good comic and potentially move it along as well to become either animation or live action. So I think that's great. Oh, Kurt says too, Virgin Comics. Yeah.
That was one.
Kurt, you're right.
Platinum Studios was another one.
They're notorious Platinum Studios.
Yeah,
Yes, indeed.
There was even one that I worked with in a weird way called Atlantis Studios. So when I wanted to start making my own comics, so I was like a screenwriting student, right? And I just had this epiphany after graduating, like what I really want to do is write comics. And I sort of went through this very circuitous roundabout way to come to that realization. And, well.
These are friends for the audio audience. I'm throwing up comments as Richard is talking. And some friends. And Noel Mercado says, Hamilton's a great guy, fellow nerd. I do miss the cape, though. Keep on writing. That's terrific.
Well, I've got a story. I've got a story for that one, too. But, that Kurt is saying their floppies were in screenplay formatted. Yeah, these places like Platinum and this one company at Atlantis Studios, they had an ad that they would run in the back of Creative Screenwriting magazine, which is real fine journalism. And they would say, hey, are you like a screenwriter, and do you want to turn one of your scripts into comics? We have artists, we can help you do it. I didn't know how to do any of that stuff, like I didn't know any artists. I didn't know to go to artist alleys and conventions and things like that. So even though this was just the kind of place that I was doing products that I said I didn't want to do, meaning like shallow, cash grab, fake Hollywood comics, I'm like, I think I'm enough of a comic book fan that I can walk the tightrope, work with these guys, and make a book that'll be a real comic. So I hired them, and everything was going fine. And they put me in touch with this great artist who I'm still friends with today, Ulysses Carpintero. He lives in Argentina, really talented guy. And he started drawing the first issue and did a great job. It was all great. And then we started getting, and the pages are coming in at a clip. It was really cool to see them in the inbox. And then we go on to the second issue, and the pages really dry up fast. And this Atlantis Studios, they say, oh, you know what? The artist is demanding more money now, and he's kind of holding the book hostage. And, can you up his page rate? And I thought that just doesn't sound right. And they had never put me in direct communication with the artist. Atlantis would always act as the intermediary.
Sure.
But they screwed up, and they accidentally copied him on one email to me. So I had his email address, and I emailed him directly. And I had heard other people at Wizard World Chicago and other conventions being like, how's it working with Atlantis? We've heard like some not such great things. And it's just, kind of the spidey sense was going off. And so I email Ulysses and say, hey, I'm Richard. I'm the guy writing the comic. Is everything okay? You did great work. And now I'm hearing that, you're unhappy. And he's like, no, I'm great. They just never paid me for the first issue. And I did all the work, and I have a baby that I got to feed. And like, I can't do free work. So I fired Atlantis. I made sure that they gave me every art file and everything, and threatened to sue them. My mom's a lawyer, so I'm like, give me all the art, or my mom's going to sue you. It sounded a little more intimidating than that. They did,
Yeah.
and I said, and basically they were keeping all the money themselves, and they weren't paying their artists, and they were doing
Of
this
course.
across the board, like, awful stuff. So I wasn't able to get Ulysses the money from the first issue, but I was able to hire him directly to do the other 5 issues, and I paid him for that. And we've been friends ever since, and so I'm always on the lookout for these kind of unsavory characters out there. Now, Noel, well, yeah.
No,
go ahead.
John. Talk about Noel for a second, please.
Well, I just want to his comment there about the cape. So I told you I've been a fan of Word Balloon all along since you started. It was 2005, right?
Right. 2005. You're a good man. Jesus, well done.
Right at 2005. Maybe I must have been a month or two before you started your show, or maybe a month or two after it was. A friend of a friend was launching. It's kind of like a precursor to like what you're doing right now. It's like live streaming talk shows, but this was like before YouTube was a big thing and stuff. And it was called The Stream. And he knew that I was a comic book guy, and he wanted to do a comic book show. And I was like, great, I'm going to do one, and I've got the perfect title for it, Word Balloon. And then I Google Word Balloon, and I'm like, who the hell is this John Suntress guy? And he's got a logo and everything. So I'm like, oh, great, what are we going to do? So my genius idea was, we're going to call ours Thought Balloons. And so it only lasted 8 episodes. I apologize. I should have come up with something.
Don't apologize. That's funny.
And it was 8 episodes, and I would interview my friends like Noel, who with his cousin Carl, they were self-publishing a really cool sci-fi comic called Dominion. And they were one of these groups of guys that would come, and we would all exhibit together at Comic Cons and stuff like that, and hang out and get drunk afterwards, and sometimes during.
Sure.
Good guys. So I would have them on the show, and I guess I was so desperate for attention that I would wear a cape during like a superhero cape during the interview, and then I asked my guests if they would want to wear a cape, and very few of them did. And my buddy Neil, he was sort of like the Ed McMahon, and he wore a fez. It was a conceptual nightmare. So we only lasted 8 episodes. You're the winner, John. Anyway, that's our paths very briefly overlapped a little there in the comics.
That's awesome, man. That's just fantastic. Honestly, I thank you, because they're a great Bridget Alverson, who's a wonderful comic book reporter, has worked for The Beat and CBR and so many different things. In 2008, she wanted to start a blog called Word Balloons. And I'm like, please don't do that. I'm like, it's just like, well, it's for kids. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm Word Balloon. I'm like, why would you do that? I'm already out there. I've been out there. I was posting my show at Newsarama at the time, and I convinced her. But I really was like, I didn't have a mother who was a lawyer that could help me. And I didn't want to get nasty, but I'm just like, come on, man. I got here first, and I'm kind of established, and Bendis is targeting me, Robert Kirkman's targeting me. Can you back off? And
I've got a great idea for a cartoon. It's called Mickey Mice. Like, that's like the same thing. No, you're Word Balloon. You were there first. Well, good for you for sticking to your guns, man.
Well, it's fine. And hey, man, truly. And it's so funny because I've had other people that I've become friends with in later years that are like, man, I was doing a podcast and you were there and I hated you because, you were doing X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, hey, I'm just doing my thing. And truly, the other thing that I had to remind a couple established shows, and this is back when there were magazine racks everywhere. I'm like, do you see on the magazine rack, there's Time, there's Newsweek, there's U.S. News and World Report. They're all doing the same thing, but in slightly different ways. I'm like, plenty of room in the pool, everybody. Jump in, swim, do it as much as you want or as little as you want. The best and worst thing about podcasting is anyone can do it. And, I'm a big, once I hit 50, Jesse Owens said, run your own race. Don't worry about the guy next to you. And there are podcasts and YouTubes that are bigger than my stuff and everything. God bless them. Keep going. Do what you want to do. I'm doing the show that I want to do. I've been doing it for 17 years. I'm very glad that people like yourself and others want to come on. It means a lot. And I don't worry about the other guys. It's all good. So,
Well, you got a good thing going, but I think I told you before we went on air, my friend Kurt and I during the pandemic, when we, pre-vaccine, all that stuff, we couldn't hang out. We would do Zoom cocktails. Kurt is an incredible mixologist. He makes great tiki drinks. You should get him and is it B. Clay Moore is the Hawaiian Dick guy?
yes,
Get these guys
yes.
together. That'll be quite a party.
That's a good call. You're right about that. They'd love each other. Absolutely. Dude, I hear you. Go on.
Yeah, no, and our drink prior to that was Manhattans. So I'd make my Manhattans, he'd make his, and we would just get on Zoom and we'd talk about what did we hear on Word Balloon this week. I feel like at the early days of the pandemic, like Tom King was, I don't think I'm exaggerating, he was on maybe like 4 times a week with you, but it was great, and you guys would just talk for like hours. And I remember being in my garage sanitizing my groceries with wipes. Like I would go to Trader Joe's once every 2 weeks to minimize my exposure. And I'm like, I got to buy 2 weeks worth of food for my family of 4 and our husky. So I would leave there with 2 grocery carts full of food. I looked like a lunatic. Like everyone thought I was some kind of weird hoarder, but I'm only going there once every 2 weeks. And then I have to be sanitizing all these groceries, 2 weeks worth, but I would listen to Word Balloon. And it was like whistling while I worked, it made it a joy. Yep, the Word Balloon Book Club. That's right, Kurt.
Well, you guys are very kind, seriously, and I genuinely appreciate that. And man, it's been a pleasure getting to know you. I'm
likewise
thrilled. It's you'll forgive me, Richard, because truly sometimes it's like, hey, do you want to talk to this guy? And I'm like, I don't know, do I want to talk to this guy? And then I'll read a book and be like, oh no, this is a good book. All right, good, everything's great. And I can honestly say that I love Scoop. It's fantastic. And I mean, Fear Book Club is the book of the moment from Aftershock, Seismic, YA brand. And like Richard said at the beginning, they've already proved themselves with Rainbow Bridge. And here's another great example of a great YA book for kids to get into. So it's out there now. Check it out. And yeah, I'm thrilled to help you promote.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it, and I know everyone at Aftershock appreciates it. And Marco, our artist, he lives in Italy, he appreciates it. Dave Sharp, our letterer. I'll just to clarify, the book is in comic shops now for your book club. Dropped on Wednesday. I think it'll be like less than 2 weeks. You can get it from Barnes and Noble and Amazon and Target and all that. You can pre-order it now. You can still order it through your local comic shop. And I always try to encourage people to get it through their comic shop, or if you don't have a comic shop in your area, go to bookshop.org, and their prices are competitive with the Amazon and all that, and they will source the book from a local bookstore, a mom and pop bookstore in your neighborhood, so you're supporting a small business. But however you choose to get it, thank you for getting it and trying it, and it is definitely part of the young readers line, just like the way Scoop is ostensibly a young readers book. But I kind of, coming from the DreamWorks school of writing, I try and write stuff that is appealing to kids and adults. So I think
absolutely.
Like, you enjoyed Scoop as an adult, and I feel like I've seen kids that have read it and they've enjoyed it. I've had grown-ups read it and enjoy it, and I think Fear Book Club is the same way. Whether you're a kid, or as long as you've ever been a kid in your life, if you've ever been in or around a middle school, and you like stuff like Goonies or Ghostbusters or Back to the Future or Monster Squad, I think you'll really dig Fear Book Club. So thank you for letting me chill on your show.
Dude, my pleasure, truly. Everybody, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And I'm going to try and do a Star Trek review before the end of the week. I'm sure Richard has heard my frustrations and passions about Star Trek. I won't bore him with those kind of details.
Oh, no, it's not boring. I find it highly entertaining how upset you get.
Although I gotta say, and I'm assuming if you know Kurt, you might know Julie and Shauna Benson, who are writing Star Trek Prodigy. And folks, I swear to God, because I get a lot of shit for already done complaining about Star Trek. The good news is I love Star Trek Prodigy. The new episode was amazing.
Yeah.
And Julie and Shauna were telling me in private messages, you're gonna like this week's episode. And I love the 2-parter that they worked on. And I'm so happy for them, because
theirs is great, and the other writers on there are a lot of Troll Hunters folks. The Hagemans, Kevin and Dan Hageman, they were the showrunners on that. I did some Troll Hunters stuff with them. They're great, and Aaron Watke and Chad Quant. They were writers on Trollhunters. They're on there too. So they got an incredible room, and the show reflects it. It's really fun.
Yeah, I honestly think it's the best new Star Trek series that's currently being made, and that's no lie.
Yep.
Pardon me. And
Yep.
it was a great relief that it was as good as it was. So, otherwise, it's going to be a big week next week. I'm going to take a swig of water, everybody. You'll forgive me.
I'll join you.
I had a cough coming, so I had to put the fire out. But yeah, next week's going to be a great Word Balloon Live week. I hope everybody liked the callbacks for some of the best episodes of 2021. I had a great year as far as content, and I just want to remind people of some of the great people that we had on. So more new stuff next week.